Well, thank you, PAT, for broadcasting our meeting, and thank you everyone who's present for this evening's Quality and Standards Subcommittee meeting. This meeting is being um, videoed and broadcast by PAT, as well as minutes being taken by our recording secretary, Leanna Harris. Thank you all for attending, and I'd like to welcome Dr. Vidala, who will be attending this evening. In a matter of a few hours, will be our official superintendent. So thank you for joining us, Dr. Vidala. We
Thank
appreciate
you.
it. And for everyone to know, Dr. Vidala has been working right along with Dr. Kerbal for many, many weeks. And we appreciate it. So I know you're up to speed in all of this. We have two areas to discuss this evening, and I will be honest, I'm going to keep it brief only because we're still in the middle of working on them. Our first area is with search, seizure, interrogation, any of the policies that are dealing with student involvement with I don't mean to say law enforcement because that is not always the case, but it is very, very closely related to our partnership with the Peabody Police and with the juvenile diversion program of the district attorney. So when these policies were written, they were prepared basically to help implement a lot of our interaction on various situations that the police might be involved in or police um, uh, procedures could possibly be used. And we're realizing now we need to separate those out. And please, anyone on the committee, stop me if I'm not characterizing it correctly. But right now, what we're working on is separating some of these policies so that they are more closely aligned with the actual the practical aspects where sometimes things need to be done in hopefully not to go into a law enforcement situation, but if they were, there have to be preparatory steps taken. And then on the other hand, if something does end up involving our police in a law enforcement role, we need to adjust our policies in that respect. So we're going to take our policies apart, make them more specific, change some of the terminology. Would you folks like to chime in on that? And is that a good understanding of what we're planning to do? Okay, I can see everyone nodding their heads. You can unmute. It's okay, because there's only a few of us, so you can unmute and feel free to speak, just like usual. We don't have to be really formal. All right, the first one. We wanted to change the word interrogation. And so we're going to go through and change that to questioning, inquiring. We're going to make these words more appropriate to the situation because of the people who would be involved in that. And I also want to let you know Dorothy Presser is definitely going to work with us on the actual preparation of this, which is wonderful. Okay. Did anyone notice anything else in the policies that they wanted to adjust or to change? That was really just the first one that kind of jumped out. I don't mean to put anybody on the spot, but I don't want to be the only one speaking either. Okay. How about, I have another question. When we do work on these policies, and actually, Dr. Vidal and Dr. Lord, you would be the two resources on this one. When we put together policies, and then there are procedures that go along with those, it eventually ends up into the student handbook so that everyone is informed of that. Would you recommend different language depending on the age level of the students? We talk about it in a couple of the policies about questioning has to be done appropriate for the age level. But on our end, do you think that the procedures need to be spelled out a little bit better depending upon the age levels, or um, better have a better explanation in that parent handbook so that they understand what's going on?
I think
Is
the
that
term questioning is pretty K-12, if that's
Mhm.
the term we're going to be using to illustrate this event within the handbooks. Questioning sounds fine. I don't know. What do you think, Josh?
So I think in general, when the school committee sets policy, we can reference the policy, and then at each level, the handbook could then represent the procedures that the schools and the administrators at that level feel like is appropriate. So they can develop the local procedures to implement the policy that you've created with Fidelity. And I think that's how they can sort of represent it in kid-friendly language within their handbooks, and also reference the policy, which is kind of overarching.
Okay.
And I think in addition to the policy, one thing that many schools did when the juvenile laws changed is they updated an MOU with the police department on school resource officers. So I think that is also something that it's very timely that as you're doing this, we can also update the MOU, meet with the police chief and talk to the SROs about the role of police in the schools and how it's community policing. And we want to make sure that they're, honoring the spirit of that we do have welcoming schools, and that's our main objective.
Mhm. Actually, thank you, Dr. Vidala. That's a really good point because we know from this whole discussion that our policies are not up to date with the current situation, current status of the law as regards juveniles. So we do have more to look at than just those very specific search and interrogation policies.
And there are some model MOUs out there that I think Mask has endorsed as well. And so in conjunction with police departments and school committees, they've created some model language that we can take, and we can, tweak the words to make sure that it fits appropriately within, our context. But, it's nice to have a starting point.
No, thank you. That's really good. Yeah, because I'll bet that based on the language that we have in our books, it probably is linked to an older MOU. I honestly do not know offhand the last date of that MOU. I remember when it was created, and it may have been amended since that time, but may not have. So that's a good point. Timeline. What is the timeline on the student handbook? Because we need to get this ready for you to put that out there. Um,
I know Marge has been working on the handbooks, and she's added all the most recent policies that you've adopted, and they're in there now.
mhm.
It would be helpful if this was done within the next 6 weeks or so that when the handbooks are established and distributed mid-August or so, they're in the final version that you want them to have out to the
Mhm.
culture.
Does the school committee vote to approve the handbook at an August meeting?
Yes, we generally do. Mhm.
So then, if we backed it off from the end point is your vote, the school committee's vote to accept the handbooks, and then we back it off to give a couple weeks to implement the changes that the committee has voted on. So I think as Dr. Lord said, probably end of July would be realistic, so that the second week of August, we could have something for the school committee to vote on.
Do you usually have two readings on the handbooks or just the one?
Just the one.
Okay.
Just the one. On policy, Dr. Vidal, just so you know, we have two readings before policy becomes permanent. Um, so if we back it through, yeah, we need to get this done by the end of the month. Tomorrow starts the clock. Okay.
Are there
Um,
school committees planned for July?
Usually we have one meeting in July and one meeting in August. By our bylaws, um, we are allowed to have one. generally what's happened the last couple of years, if I'm correct, we've met a couple times in August just because of school opening, or we've tried to time that one meeting in August closer to the start of school, just to
That makes sense.
yeah, just to wrap up some things from the summer and, get ready for the new year. So
Can't
it
recall
is,
if
it
that is on
is
our agenda for tonight. That might be something to just establish the dates for the
right.
remainder of the summer tonight.
Yeah, actually, that's a good idea because this is the meeting when we normally would do that. And I know that uh, things are different. Normally, people may be away on vacation, but with the laptop, can't get away.
Right.
Taking the meeting with us, so we're on the road.
And there's more to plan this summer than a typical summer. We have a graduation to plan, we have a reopening to plan, so we may need to meet, maybe more often than in previous summers, just to make sure that everyone's informed, and we have, even if they're brief meetings, just to give updates on, because I mean we got updates today on reopening, so there will be more updates that continue to come in, and the information is just coming at us fast and furious. So.
Yeah. Well, I can imagine. Yeah, people ask me, "Oh, what's going on?" I say, "I don't know. Wait an hour.
Exactly.
I tell you now, it'll change."
And hopefully some budget news as well, so
Yeah.
good point.
It's true. That's true. Okay, so we need to get policy to you and accompany that with a good timeline and work in um, at least some language that can be utilized in an MOU. So we definitely need the police input on this one. Okay, we started out with them. We'll pull them back in. Okay. All right. Does anyone else have anything that they want to bring forward on the issue of the, I don't even know what to call it. Uh,
Questioning procedures with young people.
yeah, yeah, that's a good one, Chris. Thank you. Okay, all right. And then one other question that I had. I know years ago there used to be a book for the staff, and it was something created by the administration, and it was um, you know how to do things basically. So school committee
Faculty
used to,
handbook.
yes, and I'm wondering if there are procedures in a personnel handbook or whatever you would call it, that those might need to be looked at as well. And it's generally nothing that the school committee gets into. We make the policy and then we hand it off. But that is something that we would want to make sure that it is in compliance with whatever the new policies are. So what what would we be asking for? Is it a staff handbook or
I want to say we had these conversations a while ago with Kara. I don't, Josh, I can ask Marge Macarelli if she can dig up any faculty handbook, staff handbook, guidelines, something like that.
Yeah, I would assume there's a faculty handbook that each year the faculty has to sign off on basic policies and procedures.
yeah?
There is
it
a series of mandatory um, videos that have grown over the year. I think there's 4 different ones that the faculty has to sign off on that they've observed each
oh,
year. That's part of it. So there's 4 of those in there. It might not be as formal as a handbook, but there's definitely a series of, as Dr. pointed out, a series of videos that teachers have to walk themselves through and sign off on, that they understand it. We collect all that information in the
right.
first month or so of school.
Yeah, because they're responsible for knowing that if this happens, here's what you do. Here's who you
Mandatory reporting. Yeah,
Mhm.
there's
right.
4 there's 4 different ones in there.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So we'll call it the faculty handbook, handbook and videos. Okay. All right. Well, actually, this is still pertinent because with our next section of the policies that we're looking at, those are actually to govern the behavior of our staff, especially with social media. And again, that's probably something that may also appear in those faculty handbooks and videos, and those would probably need to be updated as well. The policies that we were referred to are the general behavioral policies, and a lot of it really is common sense, but we know we have to get more specific as far as how people handle interactions with each other, with the public, and specifically with students as well. And this is a question I have. Dr. Lord, you may know this. I don't know, Dr. Vidal, if you have this yet, but did a memo go out last year to staff about how they need to utilize this when corresponding with students, that everything has to go out on Peabody on our email system. Has that been sent out yet, or is that something we need to implement in the policy? I know it had been discussed, and I'll be honest, I had talked about it with Kara, but I don't know where that stands.
It's a good question. I'd have to see that degree of specificity. I know there are certain communications in those 4 videos that the teachers watch. I don't recall if that, I'd have to study it more carefully. I don't recall if that particular statement about communications happening within the PBD system is part of that. We could verify that. I can check.
Yeah, or some, I mean, and given all of the technology that people have been using recently with remote learning and, you know, contacting via other platforms like remind.com and Classroom Dojo and Google Classroom, we may want it to say something of approved methods of communication. So any communication with a family is part of a student record. So we do need to make sure that it's part of, you know, you shouldn't be using your personal email when you can use your school email, but then there are other methods of communicating with families that we're using, which could be approved, you know, through the PBD Public Schools, but understanding that when you're communicating with families, you're representing the PBD Public Schools and you're acting as an agent of the PBD Public Schools, and you are an employee, and there's a specific code of conduct that, you know, we expect, you know, in terms of professionalism and just professional demeanor.
Okay, very good. I know a while ago there was a policy put through about the timeliness of a response. That there was a requirement for staff, if they had been contacted generally by a parent, that they had to respond. I think it was within 24 hours. And I could be wrong. I'm sorry. I'm just going off my memory here. And again, I think that might be something in that faculty handbook or the videos. If I submit an email asking if you could provide the subcommittee with any guidance on that,
Sure.
if you already have something in place, if we could look at it so that we can work it through and we can get that done in both areas.
Yep.
You know,
We can check with Marge and Steve. I'll send them a message
Yeah,
and see if they can.
I was thinking the same thing. Steve Farrell would likely have a faculty handbook.
Yeah.
Oh, yes, of course. That's right. Yes. And actually, Steve had worked with Kara on that whole issue prior, you know, that we're talking about as far as the contact and utilizing. I know it's to maintain records. I know that the communications it is to maintain records and to people, you know, through following through on the rules. Okay, now I wasn't going to talk all night, so I'm turning this over to the members. Go ahead, guys. If you want to bring anything up or talk about it.
Yeah, I'd like to bring something up. So, what is there a policy, and maybe Joe, Josh, and Chris can speak to this, but I'm not even sure if this is an issue or a problem, but what about teachers being friends with students on Facebook? I mean, to me, that seems a little inappropriate, because I don't know. I mean, that's just my gut. Is that an issue at the high school? I don't even know. I mean, because I could see how that could head down a slippery slope. Is that discouraged by the faculty? I don't even know if it's an issue.
I'm not even sure if it's a policy. I'm sure that there are communications that happen through social media between teachers and students.
But
Um,
what about the like private messages and I mean, I'm just talking out loud, private messages,
That's
being
probably
friends
something
with,
we need to put a solid policy in place for.
yeah, because I
Yeah.
think that could head down a slippery slope. I mean, I'm not, no, general communication, that's one thing, but I think you could see some trouble if you have a teacher being friends with high school students or even middle school students and that kind of thing. So, I mean, to me, my gut tells me that's not a good idea.
And I think I think it's a great point, and I think within any policy, the message needs to be that the discourse between faculty and students needs to be of a professional nature and needs to be educational, based in
Yeah.
education. So the one of the issues, it's a moving target, right? So Facebook, a lot of the kids aren't on Facebook now; they're on Instagram now. They're on, they're not even on Twitter anymore.
Right.
They're on TikTok and they're on all these other social media platforms, and things like Instagram. I know teachers have school-based Instagram accounts where they post pictures of kids doing work, and there's wonderful things going on, and there's kids sharing it, and it's all on the up and up. But we do have to have that policy that makes sure that it's, you're indicating that all that communication, the expectation is that it's of a professional nature, it's based in, school-related activities or educationally based. I could see an ip of a kid was friends with one of their middle school teachers, and then 4 years later they're still friends, and then there's comments that are less professional, and we want to make sure that our expectation is that you maintain that professional boundary, as an educator, and I think a lot of our families live in the city, and have coached kids since a young age and things like that. So we do want to make sure that professionally people are drawing that line, because it's a lot easier to communicate with one another now.
And also too, what I fear too sometimes, even, again, maybe I'm just old fashioned, but when we were in school, there was sort of this wall that
Mhm.
I didn't necessarily want my teacher to know everything about my family, and I might have, whether it's political or just other things going on in my life that, could make a child feel alienated if a teacher knew about something or found out about something. I just think it's a very, tough thing to deal with, especially if there's things going on in a student's home or personal life. And kids seem to post that stuff on Facebook or other social media or things, and vice versa. A teacher could post things about themselves that I wouldn't really want a student to really know about either. So, yeah, it's kind of, no, it's a slippery slope.
Yeah, and I think, just sort of to summarize everything I think I'm hearing, is this idea of maintaining appropriate professional boundaries is important, and so we can kind of develop a policy around that within the social media policy, but understanding that the ultimate goal is maintaining appropriate professional boundaries and appropriate professional relationships between our employees, and children and families.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The mentor program for the new teachers is very strong. It deals with first and second year teachers, so they're in it for 2 years. And what Josh just shared about maintaining appropriate boundaries is part of that curriculum. So I do know
Good.
that at least the new staff and all the mentor teachers but it wouldn't hurt to have everybody be reminded of it. But it's definitely part of that new teacher program.
Oh, that's good to hear.
Good. That is good. Yeah.
Ms. Dunn, may I weigh in on something that Mr. Olympio said?
Yeah.
Thank you. To piggyback on what Mr. Olympio said, he mentioned something about alienating students. And in a classroom, especially when it comes to politics, and we're going to be getting into a very heated political season, starting in September and right into November and beyond. And I think one of the challenges for teachers is when you do discuss politics, and you have 20, 25 kids in a classroom, not everyone's going to have the same political views as the teacher. And I think the safe way to play it for teachers is to stay away from the political views and to give students the information. on
Right.
both sides and let students decide where they're at.
Mhm.
And oftentimes teachers get caught up, and that can be anywhere, whether, one side or the other. And the last thing you want to do as an educator is alienate students by having a different political view than them. So I just think I'd like to see something in place as well, if not even in a policy, but certainly in discussion through our new principal, Mr. Magno, and right down into the lower ranks of our schools, because politics is everywhere. And I just think that every student should be heard. Every student should be included, and that's up to the teachers, and that's up to everyone in the building, that we share ideas, but we also welcome the ideas of all students. And that's something that I think every school district needs to do better at, especially with the political climate that we have today. Thank you.
And one other point, I have my own policy. I will not let a student friend me on Facebook until they graduate.
Yeah.
It's just a simple line, but I just, and I tell them, and they could still message me if they were in trouble or anything. That's never a problem. But Mrs. Dunn, will you be my friend? I said, I'm not your friend until you graduate.
I have
And
the same policy, Beverly. That's just good judgment.
just that's the thing. And to us it's common sense, and other people, they're like, why not? No. But you know what the other problem is? Like you said, John, teachers may not realize if they friend certain kids, the other kids know.
Right.
And that can hurt their feelings too.
Yep, there you
And
go.
you have got to be equal. And
You're right.
we've all got kids. Andrew, you'll find this out, but you know, you give to one, you give to it all. That's it.
No,
You gotta
that's
keep
a
it
great-
the same.
Great
And
point,
you
Bev. Yeah.
don't. Sometimes they're setting themselves up for a real problem because of the hurt feelings, or just not feeling that they are all equal. So,
Exactly.
it seems like it's common sense, but everybody has different feelings on it. And I made Andrew wait till he graduated to be my friend.
Great.
Well,
To make common sense more common, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know.
Well, I think that hits the nail on the head there, Dr. Lord, in the sense of social media, it's almost walking through a minefield.
Oh God, it is.
Really, and you feel for the students, and you also feel, for the staff, because they deserve their independence, but it also is something that constantly to be in the back of their minds as educators, and to touch on the political aspect that we were talking about, I think it's very important, as Mr. Amico said, the teachers stick to the facts. I think if anyone should be the ones who are expressing their opinion, it should be the students.
Right.
Frankly, the teachers at best should be a ref, if anything, listen and just providing factual background, not necessarily, engaging. And maybe they can engage for the sake of debate, but not for the sake of making a statement towards one another. And, obviously that again is a balance like anything else, but I think, we expect our teachers to have the proper judgment on that. And, we hope that is there for the most part. But as we get closer to an election and things probably get a little bit more volatile, maybe that's something that folks need to be reminded of, that you're in learning environment, and it's the students who are the ones who should be expressing their developing opinions, not you. So, I think certainly that's something that we should look at going forward.
I think you're right. I think we could write a whole chapter on the social media policy regarding political discussions. And it is very specific, but like you said, Andrew, it is a minefield. And I do think our policies do need to be updated in regard to that, because I think they started when MySpace was the big deal.
Sorry to be rude, but I need to get hooked up to be the co-host if we have any.
I know, I just looked at the clock. We need to adjourn. All right, we'll adjourn.
See you in a few minutes.
We'll meet again. We'll have some homework online with emails. Okay.
Thank you.
Everyone. See you in the next
Thank
room.
you.